Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Liberal Arts Universities panel. We are doing a DARN College Week. DARN is the Dallas-Fort Worth Admissions Counselor Regional Network. So today we will have 3 different universities represented. We will have Drake, Oklahoma City University, and Wabash.
Hey, Logan.
These are not the only liberal arts schools that are part of DARN. These are just going to be the ones that are going to be part of the panel today. So as you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. Just as a disclosure, we will be recording this session as well. And then I will be moderating today. So if you guys want, you can keep your videos as well as your microphones off and then just use the chat to ask any questions that y'all might have. But now I will just go on ahead and briefly let all of our universities introduce themselves.
Hey, everybody. My name is Rachel Butler, and I work with Drake University. I, like all of my colleagues here, work and live in Texas, but my institution is located in Des Moines, Iowa. Drake University is a smaller, so about 3,000 undergrads, private liberal arts university in a capital city within the state of Iowa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie Welch, and I'm with Oklahoma City University. And we are a small liberal arts university in Oklahoma City, which is the capital of Oklahoma. We have about 1,600 students undergrad at our school, total about 3,000 with our graduate program. And excited to talk with you today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tyler Wade, and I'm from Wabash College. Wabash is a small private liberal arts college as well. We are not located in a capital city, though Crawfordsville should be the capital of Indiana. So it's a small town, Crawfordsville, Indiana. We're just about 45 minutes north and west of Indianapolis, just about 3 hours south of Chicago. Wabash has about 1,000 students or so on campus.
Great, thanks guys. We're going to go on ahead and start off by asking some of the questions that y'all listed in the registration forms. But as you have additional questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. But we'll kick it off with, what is a liberal arts degree? How can it be useful? And what can I do with a liberal arts degree after college?
Cool. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. And to me, my background is not within liberal arts. I'll start there. I went to a public university within the state of Texas for both my degrees, and now I have worked at a STEM school and a liberal arts school. So I'll probably reference that experience a lot in my answers, but a liberal arts degree essentially I think is short for a liberal arts and sciences degree. So number one misnomer is that you can only do something within quote unquote the liberal arts at a liberal arts institution. That is not necessarily correct. Liberal arts to me is just kind of like your more traditional, I think, Socratic approach to an education. So it's just this general, well-rounded, jack of all trades kind of approach to education. So the difference I've experienced from my experiences with public institutions to private liberal arts colleges is more of this like build as you go along type of approach to education without necessarily being so honed into a very like strategic approach to learning. So that's the biggest difference I see with that, but that's a pretty in-depth question. I would imagine y'all both would say the same thing about liberal arts, so I'll let y'all two kind of answer the other questions.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I would definitely agree with Rachel as far as there being a very broad, a liberal arts degree would allow you that broad education as far as integrating all different types of subjects into what you're doing. So you're going to actually be able to utilize and be well trained and educated in various career fields, not just a specific occupation. So, and it's going to help with your critical thinking. The Socratic seminar format, discussion-based, is going to be much more, you're going to be actually more involved in your actual learning than just sitting and listening to a lecture. Our classes at OCU are very interactive, and student focused, learner focused, rather than just a teacher lecture interjected. You will get content from some lectures, but the majority will be from more interactive with your professors and things like that.
Yeah, and just to echo what everybody else said, I think one, liberal arts is basically just a fancy word for a broad-based general education. So similar to what you do in high school, at a liberal arts college, you take classes in math and the sciences and the social sciences and the humanities and the arts to kind of build that broad-based educational foundation. Now, you still specialize in areas for a major and a minor, so you get both the depth of education in those major and minor, but then the breadth come from those, what we like to call diversification requirements that require you to take classes in different subject areas. In terms of what, I think folks can do with a liberal arts education or a liberal arts degree. So one, I would say we talk on our campus a lot about majors not being what matters in the college search, but experiences being what's important to employers. And so when you go and interview for a job or an internship opportunity, it's not going to be as important to most employers what specifically it was that you studied in college. What they really care about a lot more are the different skills and experiences and the knowledge that you have that's going to be helpful for you in that position once you get out of college. So we think that one of the biggest skills, and you can look at things like NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, to be able to look and see what are the skills that employers look for today. Problem solving is often number one on that list of skill sets. And I think folks with the liberal arts experience are really good problem solvers because they've been exposed to different ways of looking and thinking at the world. And so they look at a problem and they can learn to approach it from multiple perspectives. So that's an important skill that's going to be important to you in your job search. I think it's also good to get a skill set that can be transferable from position to position. So not just about that first job that you have after college, but for all the ones that you're going to have after that. I think a lot of times society and our high schools in particular push us into this idea that you need to have a super specific major because that's the only way that you're going to have a job after college. And I think that fails to recognize that the economy can change pretty quickly, and what's a hot job today may not necessarily be a hot job 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. It may not even exist 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And so how do you have a skill set that can help you long-term as well as what the liberal arts is sort of all about? It was a long-winded answer, but hopefully a little bit helpful.
Great, thanks guys. And I know that we've touched on this a little bit, but if you guys have anything to add or elaborate on, how does a liberal arts education, such as the learning method, materials, and curriculum, differ from a non-liberal arts education?
So the way that I compare this just to my own experiences with a public education is, at least I can speak from my experience at Drake. The approach of a liberal arts education here this is where I think it really varies the most compared to what I've experienced elsewhere. But when I went to a public education, both my undergrad and my master's, there was like a sheet of paper and it said year 1, these are some classes to take. In year 2, there's this, and here's your core curriculum. At my institution, I think it was like 48 required hours, and these are your options if you have electives. But once I started working at Drake, the approach to education really seemed to be incredibly student focused, in the fact that like our core curriculum, of which we call areas of inquiry, in short, that's a core curriculum, it's about 37 credit hours. And it is essentially, I want you to understand mathematics. Here's 60 classes you could take. If you want to take mathematics within business, you could do that and count them both within that one class. And so that kind of approach to me, I think just kind of paints this visual of how different the approach to education may be for liberal arts versus a public education. However, I'll reiterate, these are my experiences. I cannot speak to every public school or every liberal arts college, but that's at least something that I think kind of paints a visual.
That's a great visual, Rachel, because that's similar to like OCU. We actually, you're given some areas of study and then you're giving a long list so that you can actually personalize and develop in the areas that you are most interested in. And so you have an area of mathematics, you have an area of history, you have an area of English, humanities, that type of thing. And then you're able to broaden that out. And then once you get to your major, you'll actually focus more specifically and have a larger list of classes that they're going to want you to take, that it would come from a well-rounded. I also think as far as the learning style, being smaller institutions, you're going to have smaller class sizes. So you're going to be able to actually have a lot of interaction. And your classroom faculty to student ratio is probably going to be, 10 to 15 to 1, where in a lot of the other larger institutions, you're not going to have that as much. So.
Kind of like what both of my colleagues said, classroom learning, lots of reading, lots of writing, pretty heavily discussion based. Most of the classes at a place like Wabash or elsewhere is going to be you and your classmates and the professor sort of seated around a table talking about the reading from the night before. So we very seldom, if ever, will do lectures. We generally, if they are lectures, they tend to be normally in the beginning. So sort of your first year in college may be more lectures, but the ones above that are what we call seminar courses, or sort of those smaller discussion-based courses. So you'll become a really strong communicator. The other thing I think that's important to think about when it comes to faculty. So when faculty are reviewed for hiring and promotion, all colleges look at 3 things in that criteria. So they look at teaching, they look at scholarship, and they look at service. And different colleges will put a greater emphasis on a different part of those sort of 3 criteria. So larger research institutions, think like University of Texas, at Texas A&M, et cetera, they focus mostly on their professors as researchers. So yes, they do teach classes, they do provide service, but the most important part of the criteria when they evaluate faculty is how strong are they at doing research. And so a lot of times that's why classes at larger universities are often taught by teaching assistants, is because the professor is focused on doing research and being able to apply for and get grants for the university. And so they don't focus as much on the teaching aspect of it, right? Liberal arts colleges flip that a little bit. So the way that you get hired at a liberal arts college and promoted and receive tenure is primarily your excellence as a teacher. Now they still do research, they still do service, but if you're not a good teacher, you will not get tenure at a liberal arts college. So it's, again, a little bit of a different emphasis on, is it focused on sort of undergraduate teaching, or is it a thing that university that focuses on developing that research experience? And so those are important things to think about as well.
Since many liberal arts universities have a tendency to be smaller, does this ever limit opportunities for student involvement? Are there fewer student organizations or ways to get plugged in at a liberal arts college?
That's a great question. Okay, so what I usually reference when I answer this question, at least in reference to my experience at Drake and my experience at working for one of the largest public schools in Texas, is the student organizations, the amount that are available for Drake, which is about 3,000 undergraduate students, is almost the same number as the school I worked for prior to, that had about 48,000 students as far as availability for organizations. So I think, if anything, there tends to be a kind of a type or a profile that really thrive in a liberal arts environment. And I think I'm realizing now that I maybe would have been a really great candidate for a liberal arts education. But my path has led me here. But I think usually the profile is at liberal arts universities are the students that want to do all of the things. All of the things, sometimes sleep, never die, keep going. And for that reason, I think there are a plethora of activities at most liberal arts institutions I've found, whether that be student organizations or research. I had a student my first semester working for Drake that got a paid research opportunity the summer before he even started classes on campus. Or maybe that's internships. Most of our students will have easily 2 or 3 internships by the time they graduate, yet they're still graduating in 4 years. So I think usually that maybe it is it the chicken or the egg theory, like which came first, or you that type of person when you come to a liberal arts college, or do you become that type of person? But either way, I think the end result tends to be we are very active individuals.
That's great. At OCU, Oklahoma City University, we are actually known as the overcommitted university along that same line. All of our students go with that because we have so many things to be involved in, and you get the opportunity to actually take advantage of that. And so we have a wide, diverse range of organizations and activities for you to be involved in, and very much our focus is definitely on diversity and inclusion and in welcoming. So if we don't have the thing that you're represented, we always tell people you can actually, start your own organization. And so, and there are avenues to do that. So I would say just because we are smaller, that doesn't limit the number of organizations and activities you have an opportunity to be a part of.
I think both Leslie and Rachel are exactly right. There is definitely no correlation between the size of an institution and the number of activities or clubs and organizations you can be a part of. At Wabash, we have 80 different student-led clubs or organizations. We provide those student clubs and organizations with $250,000 each year in funding to be able to fund their different experiences, whether that's speakers or trips or whatever, right? To be able to provide that funding experience itself. There are a lot of ways I think that small schools try to be big and bigger schools try to be small, right? So larger schools oftentimes will have like an honors program, right? Which operates a little bit more like a liberal arts college, right? And then there's some ways in which small schools can provide bigger opportunities in that, again, like I mentioned with that classroom experience, you're not fighting with graduate students at most undergraduate liberal arts colleges, right? They're mostly focused on undergraduates specifically. And so it's not you watching a graduate student perform the experiment in the lab, you're doing the experiment in the lab, right? And so it gives you, I think, that ability to kind of take more ownership over what your experiences look like. And it is really easy to start a club or organization. Most of the time, you just have to have a couple people who are also into the thing that you're involved in, and you can go and petition student government, and you can start a new club or organization.
You were muted
here. Yeah.
Thank you. With having a little bit of a smaller campus, how do you think your alumni network is? How do alumni get involved and then give back to students or their communities that they're in?
That's another great question. I think that I am so thankful for the alumni of Drake University, because I'm sure you probably picked up, I'm not an alum of Drake University, but because I live down here and I'm very active and I host a lot of different events and organizations, the alumni down here are extremely involved. And if I hadn't have had such a passionate and active group here, I'm not so sure I would know as much as I do about Drake. So even though we're states away, I think the alumni network at an institution, again, I think it comes from that personality of doing all the things. Once they graduate, they still want to be active and engaged. They want to help. I've also noticed just a very different, I think, personality trait within the alumni here versus my institution. And the biggest underlining factor there tends to be philanthropy. There we do like a national DU, Drake University, do, good day, it's cute. But we do one of those across the nation. And this active alumni organization down here, of which I get to participate in as well, are constantly looking for things, not only just on that national day, but to constantly give back to the local community. So I think that network just across the globe is very, very active and looking to help their community and their own when it comes to helping you as a graduate.
That's great. I actually also get to work with the alumni committee at OCU, and our alumni actually support various events with incoming students and um, regular current students. They host those throughout the year as far as just to be able to begin, so that you're able to begin building that network even before you become a student. So they will host events letting you know. They do various recruiting, but then also continue that on through, so you have connections and are able to make those connections through the time. One of the other things that we do, our alumni actually, we are a big performing arts school, and so our alumni actually host various, like a spring break in New York City and an event in Washington, D.C., where they will actually host and bring you in so you can begin to build your connections there too. So not just the actual giving, but they want to actually be involved in your life as well.
Yeah, I am an alum of Wabash. I guess I didn't say that before. We do talk about, and if you've got any marketing from us, you'll hear this 1,000 times. Actually, the Princeton Review has ranked Wabash the #1 alumni network in the country of every school, of every size, right? And so we're a university that has fewer than 1,000 students, but Princeton Review recognizes us as the #1 alumni network in the country. And that's because Wabash alums are really geeked about Wabash. And they think it's like the greatest place on the face of the earth. And so they will go out of their way to do anything and everything they can to be able to help out Wabash students. So we have a really vibrant alumni network here in DFW. Folks, both younger alums who are in the early stages of their career, also folks who are retirement age and kind of everything in between. They get together on a regular basis for social events. They help students be able to find internship and job opportunities. Help folks find housing. When I moved here to start this job, everything from dentist recommendations to personal physician to what neighborhood to be able to look into. They just get really geeked about that, right? I think the closest analogous to what I've seen like that for folks that are maybe more familiar with Texas, right? A&M or Aggies are super geeked about A&M, right? And they wear their Aggie ring, and it's sort of similar to that. I think what's different, you think about, okay, if I see somebody wearing a University of Texas shirt at Walmart, I don't know if they went to UT. I don't know if they're just a fan of UT. I don't know if they just got a shirt at Goodwill, right? It could be any one of those things. And there's probably not going to be a whole lot of interaction that happens between that person wearing a UT shirt, right? I could say when I fly through a DFW, and if I have a Wabash shirt on, people will come up and talk to me, right? Okay, my dad went there, or I dated a guy who went there. Oh, I grew up in Indiana. I know everything about Wabash. It's definitely something that draws people out, and they are excited. And you can tell that there's a pretty good chance that there's some sort of a connection. I've had everything from somebody come up to me in Florence, Italy, because I was wearing a Wabash t-shirt, to where I've seen like a Wabash license plate on a car, and I would like speed up to see who that person is, because there's a chance that I probably like know who they are. And so it is definitely a little bit cult-like. But people are just super geeked about the places that they go to.
Thanks, guys. Can you talk a little bit about some of the different majors that you offer? And as a reminder, everyone, please keep dropping your questions into the chat box. We had one that said, my parents are concerned that I'll just be a starving artist if I get an art degree. What are some of the various types of art degrees that are offered, as well as other majors?
Excellent. Okay, so I have a website I'm going to drop in the chat for all of you, which is solely statistics on success in getting jobs within liberal arts degrees. So I'll drop that down here. It is not Drake specific. It is a national website, so that will be very helpful to share with your parents. But to answer your question about what types of degrees, I know that in terms of liberal arts, 3,000 seems a bit big, but in terms of taxes, this still is pretty small. So knowing that we're on the smaller side for schools, we still have over 140 majors, minors, and concentrations. So at least for Drake, there is just about almost anything you can ask for. And so much so that at college fairs, I have kind of this real cheeky sign that says, it would be better to ask me what I don't have to study. and I have an answer to that. I can think of one thing. But there are just so many different things. And I think coming into working for a liberal arts college, that was maybe a misconception I personally had, was that there was going to be limited things like the arts that you can study. That is a huge section of what we offer and perform extremely well in, our 7 arts degrees or our multiple arts degrees in music or theater and arts. But we also have a massive College of Business and a wide array of other different areas too. But link for successes on just overall like rocking a job after you graduate. I think the reason why that's so high, if I were to guesstimate, just I'm going to compare and contrast. When I worked at a STEM university, where about 80% of those degrees were engineering, everything else was almost within STEM, and now a liberal arts institution. The difference I see with my students interested in engineering is coming to a liberal arts institution, they have such a wide array of skill sets because they're interacting with people through all these different academic interests. It's not just one siloed educational approach to engineering. So when my students graduate from both of those institutions, the one from my STEM school, sure, they like really new engineering, but my liberal arts kiddos do as well, but then they have all these presentation skills and soft skills, and they're the ones ending up rocking those jobs. And so I think there's a lot of benefits you could pull out of that liberal arts college experience, which is going to make you super marketable in the real world.
That's great. And yes, I agree with that. We have a variety of degrees that are offered. I put that in the chat so you could actually look through. At OCU, we are predominantly a performing arts school. That's what we're known for. But our Petrie College of Arts and Sciences and our business school, we have a nursing program. All of those give you a variety. As far as degrees with art specific, we have the visual arts. We also have just started a game design and animation that gives you a little more ability to actually design from that. So you can do the actual visual arts, you can do performing arts, or you can do more computer graphic, that kind of thing. So there are a lot of different opportunities, and I would just suggest checking into each of those various areas. What are you most interested in? And then go for it, follow that, because you will definitely have opportunities. One of the things at OCU, we really, our goal is to allow you to get you to be employed and get you to be able to earn that living. And so we're gonna help you make those connections and that type of thing. So I wouldn't be concerned about the starving artist, but there are opportunities that are ahead.
Yeah, like both of my colleagues mentioned, Wabash has 39 different degree programs on campus. I do want to make sure that to reiterate though that I think what's in to say again that phrase, majors don't matter as much as experiences do, right? I was a political science major and a religion minor at Wabash, so I joke with folks that I studied 2 of the 3 things you're not supposed to talk about to strangers, right? But half of my job is involved in recruiting students for colleges and talking to them about their college search in their life. The other half of it is in running our computer prospect database system, which involves writing code and being a computer scientist. I never took a computer science class in college, but I do know how to problem solve, right? And I do know how systems work and how things sort of communicate with each other. And so because of that, I'm able to kind of figure out a way to be able to be successful in my job, right? And so I think that degree path, again, I think people put a lot of pressure on this, oh, you need to study something super specific to get a job. And I feel like that's just not really the case a lot of the time. I think 2 things that I would add too, Rachel mentioned engineering. So one of the things that is important to think about, lots of people think that they want to be an engineer, right? And then they get to college and they take their first physics class and then they're like, oh my God, I don't want to be an engineer, right? And at a lot of places, that decision means that you have to go and start back over from square one. And so if you look at that time to degree completion,
A lot of times school students then take 4.5 or 5 years to be able to graduate from college. By going to a liberal arts college, most of us don't make you declare a major until your sophomore year of college. And so you have at least 3 semesters to figure out what it is that you like and don't like. And because of our diversification requirements, all of those classes are going to count towards you being able to get your degree. So you don't lose time at all towards degree completion, and you get the chance to figure out, okay, what is it specifically that I want to study, or I think that's going to be something that's going to be beneficial to me in the long run. And Leslie's point about the career preparation piece, we had a 99.5% settled rate within 6 months of graduation for the class of 2019, and that's with a 100% knowledge rate. So we knew about the one kid who didn't have a position, and that was because he was trying to decide between 3 different options, right? And we know about all of them. And so it's not producing starving artists, right? There aren't folks who are out on the bread line, right? We definitely work really hard to make sure that our students are in something after college. We joke, we don't want you living in mom and dad's basement. We want to have you being able to do something after that.
Thanks, guys. That is great advice and great points. Can y'all talk a little bit about some of the scholarship and financial aid opportunities that might be offered at your institution?
Yeah. So that's another thing I think there tends to be. I've never lived outside of Texas before, so I think when we're thinking about an out-of-state perspective, I totally relate to a lot of y'all, maybe if you have not lived outside of Texas. But growing up, my mom was always like, going out of state or going to a private school is expensive, period. That was it. Like, no further questions asked, no research done. And I was just like, yes, okay. And since I've left, I've realized that my 2 out of states, one being a liberal arts and one just being an out-of-state STEM school, I think even 10 years down the road, I maybe could have gotten by cheaper going there than the public school in Texas that I went to 10 years ago. And with that, that's probably because there's a lot of scholarships being thrown out. I'm going to be real with you. To get you from Texas to come to Des Moines, Iowa, I need to give you money. I'm okay for that. I'm here for it. And so for Drake, just speaking directly from Drake, every single one of our admitted students receive a presidential scholarship, every single admissible student. That minimal this year is $21,000 per year, and it goes up to $25,000, and that's one. Scholarships are, of course, stackable. So when you look at our sticker price, which is a lock-in price, it's about $45, that almost cuts that kind of in half. And so I think that makes it, just from a sticker price cut down with one guaranteed scholarship, pretty affordable. But there's some bomb scholarships. I have maybe a little bit more of an outlier situation, but I've had some students from Texas rock some awesome scholarships. I had a kid last year who came from John Paul II in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Plano, and she got $20,000 for a music scholarship on top of her, like, I think it was $23,000 per year. So it's definitely possible to make this affordable, and in some situations like that, very affordable.
I agree, Rachel. That's one of the things that I always have students are like, oh, you're private, oh, you're out of state. I'm not considering that. And I'm like, no, give us a chance, because we also offer the automatic merit scholarships based on your academics. And the higher GPA or the higher your test score, the higher the dollar. And so that's from the gate. Everybody gets that with minimum admission standards. And then it just goes up. In addition, with the performing arts, you have a talent scholarship or a departmental scholarship if you're looking in the College of Arts and Sciences or the business. And then you have honors scholarships. So, and that are all stackable upon what you have up to your cost of education. So I think it's really important for you to kind of look and see what, don't just negate it. Oh, we can't consider it, and look and see what's available, and then on top of that, we also have endowment scholarships. So that are just an automatic type of thing based on where you're from and what you're looking to pursue. So there are many opportunities available.
Yeah, I went ahead and put a link to our scholarship grid in the chat. And what both of my colleagues said is exactly right. You know, I think one, folks that tend to think about how cheap a state school is focus on the tuition side and don't really think about the room and board side. So I'll say off the bat, most colleges, if you're living on campus, will charge you room and board. Room and board typically is $10,000 to $14,000 a year. If you go to University of Texas at Austin, you go to Wabash, Drake, Oklahoma City, wherever, that's kind of a fixed cost, right? And so that's one thing to think about is you're going to pay probably $10,000 to $14,000 to go to school almost anywhere, right? We do offer really generous merit and need-based scholarships, and we do our best to try and demystify that process for families by publishing our grid. So you could look and find your GPA and your standardized test score, and that'll tell you exactly how much merit money you qualify for. And then on a need-based side, because of the generosity of our alumni, we have had sort of a long-standing commitment as a college for cost not being what gets in the way of students being able to come to Wabash. So, it's important, I think, for families to look at, okay, well, what is that total cost of attendance, tuition fees, room and board, kind of the whole 9 yards, right? Which for us is about $60,000 or so. But then when you start looking at the merit scholarship piece of it, and then think about that need-based assistance as well, we will do as much as we can to make it what we ask you to pay to come to Wabash to be as close to what the FAFSA says your family can afford to pay for you to be able to go to college. So most of the time, all of us, right, small or liberal arts colleges tend to have very, very generous scholarship programs. And I think if folks do take a closer look, like Rachel talked about, most of the times it will be cheaper for families to go to a small private school, even out of state, than it is for them to go to a state institution.
Great, thanks guys. And we have since received several questions about being test optional for admissions as well as scholarships. So if you guys just want to touch on how your institutions are doing that, I will let everyone know that if you go to texasdarn.com, and I'll drop that in there, up at the top, if you click counselors, it will have a list of resources, some of which are going to be COVID resources. So as universities have changed their policies, so I will let these three talk on what they're doing at their universities. However, we have information on about 75 universities all in one nice spreadsheet. So I'll drop that link into the chat.
Great reference, Allie. Thank you for doing that. I'll speak to Drake. So I'm really happy to share that that's something Drake has been doing. I think this is now the 6th year of being a test optional. It's literally, y'all, the reason I applied to work here. I am a dreadful test taker, just absolutely horrendous. But yet I still feel I performed very well academically. Again, I still think I would have been great at a liberal arts institution. But that was the biggest reason I wanted to work here. That being able to have not submit your test scores, I've gotten a lot of questions this summer, more than I ever have, around like, does that mean universities are looking poorly on you if you don't submit your yada, 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 and so forth. And I don't think so at all. I think this test optional review allows you to have strengths and weaknesses, like a real human. We're not all perfect in everything. And so this test optional review, I get really excited because I just don't perform well on tests. But through a test optional review, that lets me see candidates' strengths and where they really shine if it is not testing. So that is just a tidbit with that. But we are test optional. Our scholarships, those presidential scholarships, if you're admitted, you get one. So what we're looking at instead of test scores, if students do decide to be reviewed test optional, because it's your choice if you want to be reviewed with your test scores or without. And if you choose without, we're looking primarily at an essay or an interview that you and I would do probably over Zoom. And that information is in lieu of how heavily weighted those test scores would be. So that in turn would mean that's what I'm looking at to award your scholarship as well.
That's great. At OCU, we are test optional per se in this year. We recognize that it is very challenging in many places for people to actually be able to get to take those tests. So we've actually moved to that test optional. You can be admitted through our normal regular standards, or you can choose to go the test optional route for admissions. Currently, we are in the process of actually evaluating, and hopefully the decision will be made by October 1st is what they've told me. I had a meeting this morning. We are still currently requiring tests for scholarship consideration. But as far as admissions, that is definitely open that way. And they are actually currently looking to remove that test requirement for scholarships too. They haven't completely narrowed down on that, and that's what the meetings are all about. So that will be updated on our website very soon. But as far as for admissions, we do have the test optional. You will need to submit your transcript for a GPA review and letters of recommendation, different things like that. So, and all of that's out on our website.
Yeah, the same. So Wabash is test optional for the 2020-2021 enrollment cycle because we recognize how hard it is for students to be able to get test dates. So when students apply for admission to Wabash, they can select on their application if they intend to submit test scores or not, and if they want us to be able to look at their test scores or not, and make that very clear. If we don't have test scores, we still review you for both admission and for financial aid. Basically, in the absence of those test scores, our review will just place a greater rate of importance on the difficulty of the curriculum you've taken in high school and in the grades that you've gotten in those college preparation or college prep courses in high school in terms of reviewing you for admission and financial aid. You know, I like to remind students and families, I work in the admissions office, not the denials office. So my job is to read your application in such a way that I am trying to make as strong a possible argument as to why a student should be admitted to Wabash. And so test scores are an important part of that. GPA is an important part of that. The kind of high school you go to, what kind of grades you've gotten, what kind of courses you've gotten, all of that kind of comes in together, as well as the ability for us to consider any kind of mitigating or extenuating circumstances, right? So maybe you had a really rough start to your time in high school because you didn't really think that school was important, right? And so your grades weren't great your first year in high school, but they've gotten better after that, right? Well, we want to be able to take those things into account. Or maybe you had a really bumpy semester because you know, a parent was going through a cancer treatment, or you had some other sort of family crisis that was going on that impacted your grades. And so it's really important for you just to be in contact with your admissions counselor, to be as open and honest in that process as possible, because again, it's my job to argue for why you should be admitted, not to argue why you should be denied that admission. So the more information I have, the better I can do in advocating for you, both on the admissions and on the financial aid piece.
Great, thank you guys so much. That actually concludes our time for our panel today. So a big thank you to all of our panelists. If you have any follow-up questions for either Drake, Oklahoma City University, or Wabash, they can go on ahead and drop all of their contact information in the chat box. If you have questions for another university, again, all of their contact information will be on texasdarn.com. If you'll just look at our directory, we have about 76 different universities that are going to be highlighted there. So thank you guys so much to everyone for your time today. I really appreciate it. And I'll give everyone just a minute to drop their contact information in, and then we will go on ahead and wrap up. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. Really glad that, that we could be with you today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for being here. Have a great day.